Should you play Ember? There was once a time, not too long ago, about 7 years ago, that the answer was an immediate yes, of course. Now, it's usually no, find another frame. I don't think there's any new players that are being recommended Ember. However, if you are a new player or simply a player that wants to try out Ember because they never have, in this video I'm going to be going over some expectations for her. I'll try to be as unbiased as possible, but Ember breaks my heart, so we'll see how long that lasts. So, the first thing you should expect, base expectations. On a base Ember with no subsumables or augments is constant upkeep of your Immolation. Now, Immolation starts at 45-50%, whatever your ability strength that makes it spawn at. If you have about 130 to 140% ability strength, you can get up to 90% damage reduction. This is incredibly important. It's pretty much the base you need for survivability. So to increase your Immolation meter, you can cast your first ability Fireball or your fourth ability Inferno. Casting your Inferno will naturally make it go up much quicker. You can cast like 8 Fireballs to achieve the same effect. Once your Immolation meter is at 90% or whatever your max is, you will slowly start draining energy. This slow drain will slowly then start picking up to incredible speeds to the point where 100 energy will last you 10 seconds. Now, to vent this fire, you can cast your third ability in a crowd of enemies. This will armor strip those enemies and leave them ripe for the picking. However, your Immolation meter will still slowly go back up. So, do you cast third ability again? If you want, if there's enemies to armor strip, or you're going to have to cast your second ability and then double tap it again to reset your Immolation meter. Naturally, this is dangerous. It leaves you completely barren of any damage reduction whatsoever. But it is the only way to preserve your energy if you are being drained super quickly, because it costs nothing to cancel the ability. So it's very important that if you're running out of energy, you cancel it as quick as possible and then preserve what energy you have left to use that as a means of escape, like by casting Inferno, which will stun the enemies very briefly, allowing you to run away. In other words, the first thing to expect from Ember is constant upkeep and management of her Immolation meter. This also means constant upkeep and management of your own survivability. One of her biggest strengths is armor stripping. Armor stripping is incredibly useful throughout the entire game. She doesn't scale well into high level gameplay, so she is mostly for low to mid tier enemy nuking, and Steel Path, you'll usually find another frame to fit the bill. However, a weakness for her is that she is quite squishy. Even though she has damage reduction, the fact is you have to balance it. You're going to be lower on damage reduction anytime you cast Fire Blast, or straight up not have it anytime you disable your Immolation, whether by running out of energy or removing it yourself. And her base armor, shields, and health are pretty barren without her damage reduction. So she does fall off pretty deep in Steel Path missions, which would usually mean you are going to transition into a weapon platforming frame rather than a ability frame. Now, I mentioned that's a base Ember without any augments or Helminth slots. I'll talk briefly about her augments. If you go to Fire Blast, she has 2 augments for it. One is for status effects and granting status immunity. It's pretty good, but the one you're going to usually want is Healing Flame. Each enemy hit heals by 25 to 50 depending on your current Immolation level. And then if you're at full health, Overhealing will grant you Overguard. This is pretty crucial to survivability. This will make her be able to survive pretty decently in Steel Path. And then for Inferno, Exothermic. Enemies killed while under the effect of Inferno have 15% chance to drop an energy orb. This is also pretty crucial considering you're gonna need energy. She is an energy leech, therefore you're gonna need as many energy upkeep mods as possible. The last one I'll talk about is Fireball Frenzy, because hold to cast will grant all allies within 15 meters an additional 100% heat damage to their attacks for 40 seconds. This includes you. This will count for primary, secondary, and melee weapons. This is how she'll transform into a weapon platforming frame. She does have augment for Immolation Radiance. Allies within affinity range will receive 50% of Immolation's damage reduction. This is pretty useless because no amount of damage reduction Ember can give will be better than what most frames already have. And 50%, while it does seem good, because of the fluctuation between her own damage reduction, wasting a mod slot on this is hardly going to ever be worth it. So most people don't even think about running it. So basically, in the end, the thing to expect from her the most is constant movement, upkeep, and resource management. And pretty sadly, a pretty high build cost. You're going to need 1 to 2 augments, and then usually a Helminth subsumable slot. I wouldn't say it's a necessary requirement for the Helminth, but it is something most, if not all, Ember players would do, simply because she either usually needs more ability strength or survivability. The usual builds I'd see are Roar Embers or Gloom Embers. But regardless, with that being said, I think that's just about it. I try to keep it as unbiased as possible, listing only the facts, but Ember is simply just not in a good state. She falls flat of pretty much every frame out there, and as a heat-based frame, while she used to be the quintessential, the go-to heat-based frame, last year alone, they came out with 2 heat-based frames that outshine her in every single possible way. And yet they continually shown no love to Ember herself. And with that being said, that's just about it. Until next time.